When I was a sophomore at Harvard, my grandfather died, and it was then that I learned about this powerful experience he had that just changed the course of my life. My grandfather wanted to know in his 11th grade history class in a public school in New York City why textbooks presented the world just one way. He wanted to know where African Americans were. The whole world really was left out. And when he asked his teacher, she told him that African Americans in particular had done nothing to merit inclusion. And he just didn't accept that as an answer. But the question he was asking became the foundational one for my life. What is the role of art and culture for justice? And what is the role of art and culture for creating these narratives that define who belongs?
Professor Dr. Sarah Elizabeth Lewis.
She's a scholar and writer of unparalleled originality and clarity, and this book testifies to that.
Best-selling author, curator, and guest editor of the landmark Vision and Justice issue of Aperture. In her Harvard class, Professor Lewis urged me and countless others to think about visuality and its relationship to citizenship and belonging.
A woman who takes seriously a mission put on her life to understand what we have failed to see.
Sarah Lewis is here. She is an art scholar, curator, and writer. She has served on President Obama's Arts Policy Committee. She turns her curatorial eye to the concept of failure in her first book, The Rise, Creativity, the Gift of Failure, and the Search for Mastery.
I never thought that The Rise would be the book that it became. As a young curator at the Tate and then MoMA in New York, I had the privilege of seeing what was being left out of the public presentation of an artist's body of work. And I could see how many they would consider so-called failures were vital for what was deemed to be a kind of success. And that allowed me to see that there was a whole conversation we weren't having about how it is that we become. The Rise for me became a way to offer the different guides I understood would be required to pursue paths that didn't have people that looked like me walking. The Unseen Truth began through research for a dissertation at Yale and continued as I realized the stakes of what I really had to say.
The work of a decade of deep research and analysis.
A book like this allowed me to see the world in new ways that then caused me to want to continue to see it in new ways.
You bring fresh, new perspectives, new knowledge about an area that I've lived my 65 years and thought I knew a lot about.
The contradiction at the country's founding, the commitment to the fabrication that upheld racial dominance have played out nowhere more than in the visual realm. When are we going to give up the lie? The idea that anyone is better than anyone else. The book looks at the moment in which we could have. We had the evidence. To be brave enough to put on the page this narrative took spadework in the archives, and it took ensuring that I had the narrative just right, that it was unassailable. I would see the stakes of the project through what was being denied. Archives that should have been opened, a photo permission wasn't granted once the title of the book or the argument behind it was disclosed. Those denials only upped the ante of the project and gave me even more fuel and fire to complete it. Writing The Rise, prior to writing The Unseen Truth, gave me the guides that I needed to understand how to do it. Mr. Secretary General, President, Your Excellencies, I'm honored to be here at the United Nations. I'm the child of immigrants who came via Ellis Island from the Caribbean, who saw in this nation the aspirations for dignity and human rights. I'm inspired by one of the first thinkers to focus on the power of vision and culture for justice and the work of ending racism in society, the formerly enslaved leader and abolitionist, Frederick Douglass. What coheres all of my work is this question: what are we failing to see? With Vision and Justice, I found in the archive the same question that Frederick Douglass had asked during the Civil War. He went up on stage in Boston's Tremont Temple and made the case that it wouldn't be force, combat, politics alone that would cohere a new sense of what America could be. I want to advocate for one of the most overlooked, simple, but critical ways to combat the root causes of racism, questioning what you see and why you are seeing it. Douglas was pointing to the future and offering a baton. And I came across this speech written in his own hand in the Library of Congress in 2010. I remember that day I stopped everything. The speech existed in the Library of Congress, but no one had taken it seriously as a manifesto. What I wanted to be able to offer was a way for those outside of the arts to understand the power of this unfinished idea. Vision and Justice became my contribution for how we might consider doing that. Vision and Justice began as an elective course, and within a year was invited to be part of the core curriculum at Harvard. I had no expectation for how many students would turn up and what the response would be, but the transformations in the students, the requests on the part of educators from Wyoming to Kentucky asking me how to teach with the issue in their K through 12 classes, all combined allowed me to understand the need for how we change teaching and for more public-facing work.
We have illuminated the capacity of visual images to effect change and social progress in America.
Nothing should blunt our resolve to correct the distortion of historic facts. Ignorance is not simply the root of racism. Ignorance is necessary for racism to exist. Because once you know the facts, you have to act. My hope is that Vision and Justice is part of this, the unseen truth, the rise as well. When I saw these works on display at the Brooklyn Museum, it felt to me as if I was looking at a marker of one way in which I've begun. We are building on the unfinished. The work of culture to transform these narratives alongside law is the latest and perhaps most critical chapter in the unfinished civil and human rights movement around the world today. And for this work, we must continue and never be silent with resolve. Thank you.